Welcome to class. I'm Trevor, and I post D&D videos every week, generally on Wednesdays. In this video, I want to continue my exploration of the basics of a 5e character sheet. Specifically, I want to talk about kind of the middle chunk of the character sheet: armor class, initiative, speed, hit points, including temporary hit points, hit die, and death saves. Again, sounds like a lot, but I promise this will be quick and grokkable, so you'll be able to understand how to play your character in your next 5e campaign. Let's start with armor class. Armor class is often referred to as AC, and it is how hard your character is to hit. So any kind of attack, whether it's a bow or a bolt of fire or a sword, the attacker is going to roll the d20, and if they hit or exceed your armor class, then they hit you. And the same thing is true if you're trying to hit someone else. Now, your armor determines your armor class. That's pretty self-explanatory. But it gets a little bit complicated because there are a lot of different armors you can wear. At base level, your armor, if you're not wearing any armor, your armor class is 10 plus your dexterity modifier. Now, if you're holding a shield, it's 2 higher than that. And if you're wearing armor, then it's higher than that, depending on what armor you're wearing. It's a little bit different depending on classes as well. There are some specific classes that get different armor calculations rather than just wearing armor. Specifically, the barbarian and the monk have unique armor calculations that are specific for those classes. The turtle is also a race, it's a turtle, that has its own armor class of 17 because of, the turtle shell. Those 3 examples, the barbarian, the monk, and the turtle, are separate from factoring an armor class. The big thing to keep in mind is if you have 2 different formulas for how to determine an armor class, they don't stack with one another. And if you read the specifics, whether it's for your class or race, and the specifics for factoring an armor class from the player's handbook, it is pretty clear how to determine what your armor class should be for your character. Now let's talk about initiative. Initiative is how quick you are to act. As a matter of fact, when you enter combat, the DM will ask you to roll initiative. For most situations, your initiative is going to be your dexterity modifier. You might wonder, why is it separate on the character sheet? And I think that there are 2 big reasons for this. The first one is because it's a number you're going to have to use pretty frequently whenever you get into combat. And because there are certain situations where your initiative will increase, but your dexterity modifier will not. There are particular feats, for example, that give you bonus to initiative, but don't actually change your dexterity modifier. All right, now we're going to talk about speed. The speed is how fast you can move. It is determined by, generally, your race or lineage. I say generally because there are some classes that get additional bonuses to their speed. It normally is between 25 and 35 feet, and remember, if you're playing on a grid or hex map, 1 grid or hex is 5 feet of movement. Let's talk about the whole hit point section on the character sheet. Let's start with hit dice. Your hit die is determined by your class. Squishier classes like wizards have smaller hit die than larger, more beefy classes like barbarians, which just makes sense. A barbarian would last longer taking hits than a wizard would. So as you level up, you gain a hit die, and you can use this pool of hit die as a resource when you are taking short rests. When you long rest, you gain back half of your expended hit dice. You also heal up to full. You don't do that during short rests. That's only during long rests. Your maximum hit points at level 1 are determined by the maximum of your hit die plus your constitution modifier. As you level up, you gain another hit die, and you can either roll that die, or you can take the average, you still add your constitution modifier, and then you add that to your maximum HP. So that's how your HP is going to increase as you level up and progress as your character grows. Now, there is also a category on the character sheet for temporary hit points. Temporary hit points are best considered as a buffer for your HP. They are they let you go above your maximum HP, but they are generally given to you by a spell or an effect of some kind. There are 2 things to keep in mind when it comes to temporary hit points. They cannot stabilize you if you are at 0 HP. And you cannot stack temporary hit points on top of one another. So if you have 5 and then someone else gives you 10, you don't have 15, you just have 10 temporary hit points. So those are the 2 things to keep in mind when it comes to temporary HP. And last, but certainly not least, we have death saving throws. There's this little kind of Scantron looking thing in the middle of the character sheet. And this is for when your character falls unconscious. When you hit 0 HP in a game of 5e, you are not dead unless the amount of damage you took went all the way to negative your maximum HP, in which case that is maximum damage. That can kill you. It is not that likely to happen unless you are at a very low level or you're playing a very, very intense game. Once you're at 0 HP, you have to start making something called death saving throws. The way death saving throws work is at the start of your turn, you roll a d20. On a 10 or higher, you bubble in 1 success. On a 9 or lower, you bubble in a failure. If you roll a 20, you gain 1 life, you're back, you are stabilized, and you now have 1 HP. You're still probably on the ground, but you're stabilized and you have 1 HP. If you roll a 1, you bubble in 2 failures instead of 1 failure. You need 3 successes to stabilize. If you get 3 failures, your character is dead. These do not have to be consecutive. That's why the bubbles are there. You bubble them in. So you can go success, failure, success, success, and you're good. You're stabilized. You don't need to continue making saving throws. Hopefully this makes reading the character sheet a little bit easier. If you have any questions, obviously drop them in the comments down below. And as always, be safe. Make smart life choices.